Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to part 5 season 2 of What If Toga Was in 1A. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. Toga sat in class sometime after the day of the practice test. Things had been moderately calm since then besides her mother's reminders of how she needed to hang up her clothes due to how wrinkled they were getting. Toga had avoided her closet where she had the blood hidden away. She had managed to find ways to avoid any thoughts about it whenever she didn't have to go into her closet, but its existence had still become a bit of a hindrance that had made her regret that she had brought it home in the first place. Whenever she went to try and throw it away, it always ended in a new attempt to not drink it. The blood by this point had grown thicker due to its improper storage, though not too greatly so. The change did make it a bit easier for her to resist her urges further, but not by much, not to mention her new need to avoid straws. Toga ended up spending most of her time on the stain forums, or hung out with some of the girls from her class one way or another to help her stay distracted from her wandering thoughts. Luckily for her, a major distraction came that week in class with the announcement of the finals. Everyone had seemed pretty confident until Aizawa reminded them of the knowledge part of the test. Many were pretty nervous about the written test, but Momo offered the others a group study session at her house. She even asked Toga if she wished to join her. Toga glanced from her to Uraraka, who seemed to have joined Izuku, and Ida to form their own group. She thought about joining them to hang out with Izuku again after so long of their time apart, as well as to study with her best friend like they usually did for tests. Her eyes though locked with Bakugo's, who looked off the moment their eyes met. It seemed he was all by himself again. Toga politely told Momo thank you for her offer, but she had other plans. Momo understood and left her to it. As Toga stood up to go to Bakugo, the lunch bell rang. She left with the class to the cafeteria where she got her food, then sat down at Bakugo's table across from him. "What do you think you're doing, freak?" he muttered in an annoyed fashion. "Bothering you, duh," she teased with a smirk. "I figured you missed yelling at me." "Whatever," Bakugo practically muttered as he looked off with a scowl. Toga mildly pouted. It seemed the boy still was acting weird around her after their fight. Toga ate some food off her plate. She supposed this at least meant she'd be able to get 5 words in when they talked now. "So are you gonna study with anyone for the finals?" she asked curiously. "Why? Do you need help to avoid being an utter idiot further?" he grumbled out. "Actually, I figured you may get lonely, but I can pretend I'm hopeless without you if that's what you want," she replied simply. She did need some help with studying since it wasn't her strongest suit, but it wasn't like she would be hopeless without the boy. Bakugo gazed over to her for a moment. He took a few bites of his food, then grumbled a bit under his breath. "I'm not lonely, freak. I will help you though, since you clearly need it," he huffed out. "Meet me at the school gates after school. We'll go to my place to study. Just don't be weird about it, got it?" "You got it." She ate some more of her food. "I am a bit surprised though." "About what?" he asked with a rose brow. "I mean, we've never been on a date before, and you're already having me meet the parents," she explained nonchalantly. "Hey, I said not to make it weird, freak," he shouted at her. Toga snorted with a laugh at his reaction. It was sorta odd to admit, but she had sorta missed his shouts of annoyance. She also missed the fun she had when she teased the boy. Maybe she had grown to see him as a friend after all. After you looked past his spiky shell, he wasn't that bad of a guy. He just was emotionally stunted at the age of 6 and couldn't express his feelings like a normal person. Once you were past how he shared his feelings via angry shouts, he was someone who seemed actually to genuine care for others. Toga kept up with her teases towards Bakugo as they ate lunch. Her next set of teases were more about how she hoped he'd get all dolled up for their study session like he did during his internship. She left him be after lunch and went to hang out with Uraraka between lessons. Uraraka of course invited Toga to join her group, but Toga declined. She told Uraraka about her plans with Bakugo. This resulted in her friend teasing her about the possibility of Toga liking the boy, an idea of which was promptly rejected by Toga in a similar manner that the boy had rejected her teasing earlier. Unlike Toga, Uraraka did stop soon after Toga pouted with puffed up cheeks. At the end of the day, she said her goodbyes to the other girls, then joined the impatient Bakugo, who muttered about how long it took her to get to him. Toga followed him back to his house, where she stood in shock. She watched a shouting match between Bakugo and his mother start relatively quickly, all while his father stood passively between them like a scared child. The father tried to calm the two down, but failed with each attempt. Then came the explosions. Then the property damage. Toga's eye twitched a bit, then whispered, "Everything makes too much sense now." After the two finally stopped fighting over whose method of folding laundry was superior, Bakugo introduced Toga to his parents. "This is Himiko," he said with a lazy motion to the stunned Toga. "You actually learned my name?" she asked, dumbfounded. "Of course I did, freak," Bakugo grunted out in reply. His reply seemed to trigger another mini-fight between him and his mother for how Bakugo addressed Toga with an insult. While they fought, his father introduced himself. He stated he was pleased to meet her. then informed her that Bakugo talked about her often ever since the tournament. He didn't clarify exactly in what way he talked about her though, be it good or bad. After the second shout match ended, Bakugo explained Toga was there to study, and would be coming over for the rest of that week to do so. After his mother insisted she stay for dinner, Bakugo led her over to the living room. On the way, Toga texted her mother to tell her she'd be at a friend's house for dinner. The two started to study together for a while, and much to Toga's surprise, the boy was really smart. He even helped her with a few subjects she didn't understand. She brought up how surprised she was as well as told him about the issue she was having with the furtherment of her quirk. As they made their way to the table to eat dinner with his parents, Bakugo shook his head while he spoke. "You really are mentally hopeless without me," he said with a scoff. "Did you just call me stupid?" Toga asked with her brows frowned. "No, freak, just hopeless, but you are apparently deaf too. Listen up, cause I won't say this twice. Your quirk needs blood to allow you to shift into others' right," he explained as he waved off Toga's surprised face. "It was obvious after our fight that's how it worked. Stop giving me that stupid look, freak. Now it's clear that you need the DNA the blood provides to turn into others. Your quirk probably converts the DNA into your own or replicate it with the flesh it makes around you to change your physical form or something similar. Which means it picks out just a few parts of someone's DNA to replicate their looks and voice. You could start working on figuring out how it does this, then expand what all it copies. Since there's a lot of stuff that you could get from DNA, you should have plenty to work with." Toga stared dumbfounded at the boy as they sat down. Bakugo's brow twitched at her in return. "What, freak?" he asked. "It's just that. Wow, you're actually some kind of a genius," she exclaimed with a smile that formed slowly on her face. "Why are you acting like that's so shocking?" He replied, clearly aggravated that she thought he was anything less. "'Cause you act like you never think about anything before you do anything, hothead," she explained, giving him his own tease of a name. He waved her off as his parents came over with the food. The four of them ate together while they talked about their days. Toga was pretty excited from the advice Bakugo had given her as well as from their overall hangout. She went home happily, her thoughts filled with all their studies and her plans to further her own quirk. The next day while she was at school, she picked up some books about DNA, then once again left Bakugo's to study the next few days. On the last one, they decided to go to Toga's house. Things went normally as usual, with the added occasional tease from Toga's mother. She suggested the possibility of them dating at this point, after how often they had been studying together, which both of them promptly rejected the idea just as soon as it was brought up. As annoyed as the two both were, her mother just laughed every time. She left them alone eventually, and Bakugo stared down Toga for a moment before he quietly muttered, "So that's where you get it from." "Hush," Toga whispered back to him. The two kept up with their studies at the dinner table while her mother started to cook. Around this time, Toga's father came home. He stared at them here and there, but ultimately didn't say anything to them. Toga and her father had made a good bit of progress over the last semester, but things were still a bit strained. Her father still mildly distrusted his own daughter, which was as clear as day. Bakugo watched him rather than studied for a long while before he realized what was going on. He stood up, then shouted to her father and pointed. "Oi, will you quit your staring? She's just studying, not planning your demise, so quit staring at her like she is," he demanded with his shouts. "Bakugo, please," Toga started but was cut off by Bakugo. "No, I'm not gonna just sit here with this bastard staring like that. He must be a pretty shit father if he doesn't know his own daughter well enough to be that freaked out by her," he declared. Silence took over the room, everyone but Bakugo was at a loss for words. Bakugo picked up their things with a huff and told Toga to lead him to her room so they could study there. Toga blushed a bit, but led him there. Once there, he gave her a look when he saw the mess it was. He then shoved some things out of the way, then proceeded to set up a spot on the floor for them to study. The two studied in silence for a bit before Bakugo spoke up again in an almost soft tone. "You got nothing to prove to him, freak. If he doesn't let you in, it's his loss, not yours." The two locked eyes for a moment before Bakugo looked back down to his notes. "Now turn to chapter 23. It's the last one we have to go over." His voice went back to its usual demanding tone with the last part he spoke. Bakugo left before dinner after they finished studying. Dinner that night was pretty quiet. Toga tried her best to avoid her father's eye contact, and left when she finished eating. The next week, Toga breezed through the written tests thanks to Bakugo's help, though as soon as the written finals were passed, the exercise one started. The reveals about the test happened just as they did in the show, as well as the pair-ups. Before Toga could ask who she was paired up with, Aizawa cut her off with an additional announcement. "Today we will also be running a test for a student in 1 degree Celsius due to the class odd number of students, as well as needing to test him to see if he can be transferred into class 1 next semester." He motioned the student over. The class looked behind them to see Hitoshi in his gym uniform and wraps. "The rules are the same for you both. Your target will be the teacher of class 1B, Vlad King." Vlad walked up then with a nod to Toga while Aizawa continued on. "Get ready. The first group will be starting soon. Aizawa started walking off. While the others talked, Hitoshi ignored the other students who wanted to speak to him to come over to talk with Toga about their plan. He was more focused on building a solid plan down than he was about socialization with a class he may not even get into if he failed the test. Unlike the other students, the two were more confident about the task thanks to their time with Aizawa. They wondered if he had actually been preparing them for the test the whole time. As the first group went up, the two covered how much Hitoshi had managed to get better with since their last time they saw each other. After this, they came up with a plan together on how they could finish the task. All they had to do was cuff Vlad or flee. Hitoshi doubted that he could get into Wano by passing the test by just running. Toga easily agreed, and the two decided to plan for a way to win with the cuffs. Toga knew plenty about Vlad's quirk thanks to her time with him, and filled Hitoshi in about his limitations along with what Vlad knew of them. Soon they finished their plans. The two focused on the matches that resulted the same way they did in canon. After this, it was finally their turn to take their own test. Vlad stood near the escape point when the test began. It took some time, but soon Hitoshi darted over with impressive speed. Vlad went to comment on the speed, though quickly remembered the boy's quirk. The boy leapt up to kick Vlad in the face, which was blocked by Vlad's forearms. The boy back-flipped off Vlad's arms with a stumble-filled landing that felt as though he hadn't expected to hit the ground so soon. Hitoshi ran at Vlad to waste no time after he composed himself. The boy reared back a fist as he grew closer to Vlad. Vlad went to prepare to catch the fist, but the boy dropped into a skid in order to slide between Vlad's legs. While on his back, Hitoshi arched his body with a semi-roll. He kicked off the ground as his body twisted up onto his palms, then extended his arms out all the way into a handstand. Hitoshi finished the twist of his body to face Vlad as he brought down all his weight with his feet into the pits of Vlad's knees. Vlad fell forward as Hitoshi used the momentum of the attack to bring himself up to a standing position. Hitoshi quickly moved to grab Vlad's arm, but Vlad was too fast. Vlad spun around to grab the boy first. Vlad then pinned him to the ground quickly. The boy sighed with a wince from Vlad's weight, who started to eject his own blood to bind the boy with. The boy grew a bright blush upon the thought of the blood that would soon exit the man's hero gear. "You know, I tried to warn you that the height difference may throw me off, but I guess you were right about it not being too drastic, that it'd be a big issue." The boy's voice altered to that of Toga's as the flesh on his body melted away to reveal Toga underneath. Vlad's eyes went wide. His eyes shot down to realize the lack of wraps around the girl's neck. He had been more focused on the attack to notice the very weapon Hitoshi should have been using. Before he could fully react, Hitoshi's wraps shot around him quickly to bind him. "You're resourceful, but you don't give yourself enough credit. I figured you'd figure something out," the real Hitoshi called out as he swung in with another end of the wraps in just his boxers. The boy skid across the ground towards the two and cuffed Vlad quickly. Once the match was declared over, he helped Vlad out of the wraps. Toga rubbed her arms where she had been pinned. Hitoshi explained how despite his training he still hadn't had enough time to perfect how to fight up close as well as Toga. He did though figure Vlad would think otherwise after he and Toga caught up. Originally he planned to go in with Toga to fight together, but if Vlad knew he was around he'd know to expect his attacks too. They had considered Toga moving in while she was invisible to use the wraps, but since she didn't know how to use them correctly, that too would likely result in failure. In addition to that, Hitoshi definitely wouldn't have been able to distract Vlad on his own long enough to give her an opening to even try. Given all this, they both figured if Toga went in to distract him as Hitoshi and keep him on the defensive to not notice the lack of wraps, Vlad wouldn't think to expect a surprise attack by the wraps. The plan mostly relied on the hopes Vlad would be too distracted to react, but thankfully it had worked. Aizawa agreed that their plan relied a bit too much on the right possibilities of hopes working in their favor. He also agreed that their use of knowledge of knowing what their opponent's strengths were, what they already knew and would expect, alongside knowing their own weak points, still was great thinking on their parts for making a plan. Aizawa declared Toga passed and Hitoshi did well enough to join 1A. Toga smiled brightly at Hitoshi and gave him a thumbs up. "Congrats, Hitoshi. I knew you could do it." Toga excitedly congratulated. "Thanks. Can I have my clothes back now?" Hitoshi asked, and pointed to the uniform she still had on. "Though," Toga awkwardly laughed. "Right, sorry." After they finished changing, Aizawa informed them of a training camp that they would all go to soon to further themselves further. He went on to inform them of when they would leave so they could be in to be ready to go. He also informed Hitoshi that he too would be expected to go now that he was a part of 1A, but that he let the class go and change out of their costumes and go home for the day. This time Hitoshi talked here and there to the other students on the way back, while he promptly ignored any comments about his boxers. Toga talked with the others before she went home. Before she left, she congratulated Hitoshi once more. When she got there, she excitedly told her mother how she passed the rest of her finals as well as the camp she would attend soon. Her father listened on from the couch. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then walked over after a bit. He bit back his own fear and doubts he had for his daughter, still then gently touched Toga's shoulder. "Himiko, I'm sorry for how I treated you." His face softened as his eyes met his daughter's that grew teary already. "I judged you for something you did as a child, and failed to give you the support I should have as a father. I just want to let you know that I'm proud of your accomplishments. And from this point forward I'll support you the best I can to make up for everything." Toga looked up to her father as she began to happily cry. She lunged forward to hug him tightly. Everything she had wanted for so long finally had happened between her and her father. She knew Bakugo said she didn't need his approval, but to have it just made her world feel finally complete at home. She honestly figured it might have been how Bakugo had stood up for her the other day that had helped push her father to this point. She'd have to thank him for it later. For now she just enjoyed the hug her father permitted her to give him. Her mother teared up and joined in on the hug. Toga's father groaned a bit from the air that was squeezed out of him. Despite this, he finally allowed himself a soft smile as he wrapped his arms around them both to hold them gently. The hug lasted a long while, but not nearly long enough to make up for what would soon come to pass. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We The Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, we're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So, thank you all for watching, and have a great day.